Ooh, what is going on? Salute, folk. You might hear a little background noise, but it is what it is. Hey, getting work done. Sometimes the work has to be done, and it might interfere with times that you're doing other things. But do know that I am here for you, my folks. I am here for you. Once again, back in the mix. Of course, another edition of Boxing History every night. We try to do this every night. Let me bring this mic up a little bit closer. We want to do this every night, and I appreciate you being here. If you're listening in the playback game, salute to you. If you're here right now, then big kudos, big cheers, major moment. We're about to do this, baby. We're here to talk history. As always, salute to my man Dan in the building. Dan holding it down. What's going on with you, Dan? You might hear a little background noise as I was saying, but it is what it is. He says, "Hey Josh, thanks for having me." Hey, anytime, Dan. Always appreciate having you in here. I know you're a knowledgeable boxing fan as it relates to the history for sure. And of course, we're here to talk boxing history because we need more of that. We got a lot of modern stuff going on, and there's no shortage of channels that talk about what's going on in the now, but we like to focus on the history of the sport because there's still many stories that haven't been told. When it relates to boxing, you get some very interesting stories and very interesting characters and moments in the history of the sport. So we're going back, baby. We're going back. So I appreciate you being here. Of course, got to shout out everyone who drops by and shares some love. It's just one of those things. Joseph Phoenix, appreciate you being here, buddy. Love it. Says hello once again, sir. Hello to you, Joseph. Of course, love to have you in the building, Joseph. I mean, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, without a doubt, for me being able to be on here and for you all joining in for the discussion. Of course, gotta have it, gotta love it. Appreciate you, Joseph. Thank you. Another knowledgeable boxing fan. Hey, follow these guys, everyone. If you're listening right now, or if you're going to be listening in the playback, gang, then follow these guys. I mean, you want to learn about the history of the sport? We have that covered. And no doubt about it, my man Flack Boxing in the building representing Flack Boxing, of course, a man who is knowledgeable of the history of the sport. So it's always a pleasure to have Flack in the building as well because, hey, we need others for the dialogue. Boxing can be a lonely sport, especially as it relates to the history of it. I mean, I appreciate every single one of you that are, that are here now, as well as those that will be listening back. I mean, it is all appreciated because we're talking history, and hey, if you're a history buff like myself, it kind of extends beyond boxing, but that's where the focus is, of course, for here in this channel. It is boxing because that's where the love is, boxing history. I mean, what more can you ask for? I mean, you get it all wrapped in one, history and boxing. So if you like history, stay here. If you like boxing, stay here. We are here. Dan says we learn from the past, without a doubt. That is true. We learn so many great things about these boxers. The fact that many things have already happened in the sport, so there are no new things in the sport of boxing as far as technique, styles, etc. Don't think for a second that it hasn't happened before, because it has. The guys were scientific back in the day. I'm working on a video right now. I'll go ahead and call it Denver Ed Martin. He speaks about the science of boxing even back then, early 1900s. So don't think for a second that these guys weren't skilled, weren't trying new techniques and getting things done, because they were. Joseph Phoenix, one of my favorite subjects, the late 19th century, early 20th Black American boxers, without a doubt there, Joseph. So appreciate you without a doubt. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to talk about a man who is one of those boxers. And if anyone wants to jump on, of course, let me know, because we welcome all comers. Flack, you want to jump in the mix? You already know, buddy. Let me know. We can make it happen. We welcome all comers for sure. So the subject of this video is a man by the name of Bob Armstrong. That's a very common like name, right? We run across that often in boxing. Just some names that are very common. If you were to Google Bob Armstrong, I can only imagine a number of things will pop up. But that being said, the boxer is Bob Armstrong, and I can't help but think about Stretch Armstrong. Remember that? character. And I remember having a little toy of Stretch Armstrong back in the 90s. But that being said, we're talking about Bob Armstrong, who is a former colored world heavyweight champion in the sport of boxing. And this is a man who, for those that aren't attuned to the history of boxing, you may not have heard this name before. He doesn't get a lot of accolades. He doesn't get a lot of fanfare in that sense because he's not someone with a glaring or standout type of record. He's not someone who is going to ring bells amongst the history of the greatest heavyweights in boxing. Of course, you're going to get to a number of names before you get to Bob Armstrong, but be rest assured that he was a major player who had a significant impact in boxing during his time. He is one of those guys who was instrumental in other boxers being able to continue to work their craft. He was instrumental in other boxers being able to develop in the sport. So those are the types of things, the types of stories we don't often get. We get the glamour side, we get the finished products that are the champions who became stars or superstars, and we know their names sort of second nature, second hand. But trust me when I tell you, there were a number of guys who were instrumental in said champions like James J. Jeffries getting to where they were in their career. And Bob Armstrong is one of those guys, without a doubt. Excuse me. Bob Armstrong, most certainly one of those guys. So get to know the name right now. Certainly get to know the name. I mention it all the time. If I'm bringing them up, then likely there's a boxing video on 86 Boxing, the channel, YouTube channel. Oh, yeah, be sure to hit like, subscribe if you haven't. Subscribe to everyone, as a matter of fact. But be sure to do so. Hit like and subscribe. So we do have a video on Bob Armstrong. Now, I must digress, especially if you came on board in recent months. It's not a long video. It doesn't go into a deep amount of detail. It kind of just highlights and touches on the major fights that he had, or the bigger fights, the fights that would be considered the marquee fights during his time. But that being said, he is one worth checking out. So look on the 86 Boxing channel. There is a Bob Armstrong video. There are a couple of them, really one main one that kind of touches on what I'm speaking of, an animated video, one of my earlier videos. So don't expect the detail in the likes of the recent videos. But that being said, he's someone could certainly do a revamped version of. There's a shorts video on him as well. But across YouTube in general, yeah, you won't find a ton of stuff about him. So it's good that we're having this discussion right here and right now. Let me check out the comments real quick before we dive into the great Bob Armstrong, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So Joseph Phoenix says, 2 questions. Did the colored champion have title belts? So I know from a namesake perspective, it was something that was recognized and tracked with a lineage. Whether there was an actual physical belt, I'm not 100% positive of such. I don't know that to be the case for sure. I know someone would like Scrapbook Boxing would probably know, maybe Hardline Boxing Talk would know, but certainly it was something that was tracked from a lineage perspective back to C.C. Smith, who we have a video on, who was the first recognized world colored champion, heavyweight champion, that is, I should say, heavyweight champion. And that was 1876 in that time frame, essentially. But I don't know if there was an actual physical belt. Now, the Police Gazette, which was the premier newspaper for covering boxing, and I guess you can say sports and other things at that time, or at least the late 1800s, they did have a belt that was created, and it's a belt that they provided to their champions. Specifically, I do know that there was a Police Gazette belt that was the heavyweight championship belt. John L. Sullivan had it at one point. But that being said, as it relates to the colored titles, I don't know that there was an actual physical belt. Now, that's something worth looking into. Of course, I told you I don't know everything. I definitely don't know everything. That's something worth looking into. I'm going to dive into it a little bit to see if I can find out something, because I wouldn't doubt that there was some variation. Even with John L. Sullivan, there were a group of fans and followers who actually created a belt for him at one point. and this was a belt that they funded themselves. And so I'd imagine that there potentially could be something like that happened with the colored title, or maybe one of the holders themselves had one. But certainly an interesting question there, Joseph. I don't know I have the definitive answer, but I hope that got us at least a little bit closer. But if someone else knows, certainly let us know. It's all about who you fought. Look at who he fought. Exactly. Bob Armstrong, when you look at that record, it would tell you a ton of things that are a little bit different than your average fighter. It'll tell you who he fought, it'll tell you why he has the record that he has and the significance of such. I say this all the time, and it's a slogan. Maybe it needs to be trademarked. All wins and losses are not created equal. They are not created equal. I'll tell you, for instance, Bob Armstrong, his first contest was with Joe Choynski. You know, the same guy that knocked out Jack Johnson, a guy who could have been light heavyweight champion of the world, a guy who was one of the most skilled boxers of that era, and one of the most skilled boxers in history. And of course, he knocked out Jack Johnson, who is one of the top boxers in general during that period. That being said, that was the first contest for Bob Armstrong. Think about that. His first ever professional boxing match, and it was against Joe Choynski. Now, I'm not saying that's asking a lot of a fella, but it's kind of asking him a lot. And of course, it ended up being a draw. But that being said, that just shows you the depths of some of these records and some of the competition that these guys were in. You know, you didn't get the fast track, or you didn't get the slow track. Of course, we've seen it here in modern times where you can kind of slow track a fighter. You don't put them in with someone too tough early on. You just kind of slowly build them until you get to the point where you feel that they are comfortable with who they are and what they can do in that ring. Because certainly if you're a young fighter, you can be ruined by a more experienced fighter. We've all seen it there on the pro side. Heck, I've seen it on the amateur side. You can end up being in a Golden Gloves tournament and there's random matchups. You might end up being with a guy who is too legit for you to be in there with, and it makes you end up quitting the sport. It happens for sure. So back then, this was certainly the case. Some of these guys, they were just kind of thrown in the mix and had to do what they had to do. Also, when did Gum Shield's mouthpieces come into use? That's a good question right there, Joseph Phoenix. I don't recall. If I'm remembering correctly, I think I did know this at one point when it was introduced, but I cannot recall at this particular juncture. But I think there is a specific time frame in which it was introduced. I just can't recall it at this point. And I think I did know it at one point. But that is a very good question. You're throwing out some fastballs right there. Two-seam fastballs, Joseph Phoenix. Two-seam fastballs. You left me swinging for the fences right now, but I'm not hitting anything. Hold on. Salute to my mom. Says evening sun watching. Of course. Number one fan right there. Appreciate you being here, mother. Yes, indeed. So we're talking boxing history again, Bob Armstrong, and I appreciate you. Yeah, you seem to be in tune with the boxing history side of the sport. So thank you for being here. And we're going to keep this thing going without a doubt. Oh, it's all great, Dal. It's all great. We're lighting this thing up. Flat boxing. I know Jack Britton complained about Ted Kid Lewis using a mouthpiece in one of their fights. That's a very interesting one. That's a very interesting one right there. We know those guys fought 20 times. Greatest rivalry in the history of boxing, certainly one of, but I guess you can say this one is the greatest rivalry in the history of boxing. Jack Britton versus Ted Kid Lewis, the boxing marvel Jack Britton, that is. I mean, if you don't know those two guys, go look them up right now. As a matter of fact, 86 Boxing, we're working on a video for the two. It's going to take a while. I've said that before. It is going to take a while, but it will be coming at some point, hopefully here in 2023. We got half the year left. We can make something happen. We can make something happen, baby. But yeah, that's a good nugget right there, flat boxing. So this would have been early 1900s, of course, in that time frame. So maybe it was around there it started to be introduced. But I feel like I did know at one point. I just cannot remember it now. You know how that is. I'll hop on, but I can't give much information on Bob Armstrong. 1890s, 1900s is Dan's area of expertise. Certainly, all good. Flag boxing. I'm gonna drop that. I'm gonna drop that link in there. I'm gonna drop that link in there, buddy. But it's all good. Hey, we're gonna learn about Bob Armstrong right here and right now. You don't have to give much about him, but I'm pretty sure, Flack. I'm positive that you know some of the opponents that Bob Armstrong was in with, so that will give you an idea of just how tough a resume the man had and who he was in the sport and what he meant to the sport. He was a sparring partner for a great deal of top level fighters. Of course, the most, I won't say famous, but certainly the probably most recognized from a heavyweight standpoint at the time, of course, being Jim Jeffries, James J. Jeffries. He was a sparring partner of James J. Jeffries. Not only him, but others as well. Gus Rulin. So you name it. So he played a critical role in the development of those guys. Salute to you, Dan. Of course, we appreciate your knowledge there, Dan. So, as mentioned, anytime you want to jump in the mix, it is what it is. Tim Wow. Salute to you, Tim Wow. Appreciate you being here, buddy. Tim Wow. Of course, we're here talking history, so it's always great to have you in the mix. He said he gave the great James J. Jeffries and went 10 rounds, hard fight. Yes, without a doubt. Without a doubt. So they were sparring partners, and you know how that can be because we see it here in modern times. Anytime you get two guys who are familiar with each other from sparring, then it's always, or it tends to be a more tactical fight because they know each other so well. They've been in there, they've gone numerous rounds, so that makes it tough for them to find that little opening or exchange that can get them completely over the top. And this was the case with Jeffries Armstrong. But Armstrong, and there's some pictures out there. I might have to pull up some, but you can just see that he was in the mix. And speaking of such, of course, I must say that Armstrong, he was a pretty solidly built guy. He was one of those. He was about 6'4", and he wasn't super heavy, but he could get to that 200-pound range. So just think about that. And he was ripped. He was is almost a slender type build, but he had a little bit of mass to him. So he was just one of those big ripped guys for the weight, and you have to imagine pretty strong. Now, as we know in boxing, of course, that doesn't always guarantee that a person is actually going to be able to outmaneuver, outstrength, or whatever it may be another boxer in the ring, because there's a number of things that have to be taken into account. And you'll see that over the course of Bob Armstrong's career in fights. Now, he didn't have a ton of fights, but that being said, the fights that he did have, for the most part, the majority of them were all top level fights. It would be like jumping straight in with the top contenders and the contenders that were really legitimately in title contention right from the jump. So that's kind of how it flowed for him. But you're right there, Tim. Gave him a hard fought 10 rounds where, hey, those guys knew each other. They were very much familiar with each other. Very much, without a doubt. Jeffries in his prime, too, without a doubt there. Josephine, the boxer, and Bob Armstrong there likely had a number of unrecorded fights. Joe Choynski might not have been his first recorded fight. That is a true statement right there. That is a true statement for the most part there. Joseph, you're all right. We know oftentimes these boxers, they had a number of fights that were kind of under the table type situations or back room type situations. Let's face it, boxing was not a sport that was highlighted as being one of those for that are family friendly. It wasn't baseball or anything. It was regarded as a sort of degenerate type sport, and it was frowned upon in many circles, and certainly from a legal standpoint, and we're talking legislation, etc., we've seen how that has affected the sport over the course of years. So it wasn't one of those sports where everybody was just happy-go-lucky. Let's go watch a boxing match here tonight. They had to go about it in different manners. I know if you think about many during that era, especially the late 1800s, given some of the laws and such, that would disguise what would ultimately be real fights as exhibitions. I mean, you could get a little testy in there, but that's often why we hear the stories of police jumping in to stop a fight because it got a bit more testy and realistic than expected for exhibitions. But of course, there were situations where they would turn a blind eye, for instance, or hey, nothing to see here. As a matter of fact, John L. Sullivan versus Jake Kilrain, the sheriff of Mississippi City, or this is Mississippi City, I believe it's Mississippi City. There was the sheriff and some of his crew in attendance, and of course that fight was not supposed to happen. The governor had pretty much a warrant out for Sullivan and anyone involved, Kilrain included, to not make that fight happen. But you know, sometimes you got to let history present itself. You have to let history play out, and that's essentially what they did, despite the fact that we know that it wasn't intended to happen. But certainly, these guys probably had a ton more fights than what is recorded. And then if you go to some boxers, I mean, they talk about it throughout their sort of history and I guess their career and just giving descriptions and such of what they did in the sport. Jimmy Wow, for instance, estimated over 800 fights. Just think about that. It's not even real, you know. It's pretty crazy, pretty crazy when you think about it. But yeah, one of those situations. I did drop that link in there for those that may want to drop on, show some love to the rest of the people in the building. So yeah, we're in here. We're in here again. We're talking Bob Armstrong. Salute to you, Boz. Here we go again. What's going on, Boz? Appreciate you being in the building. Oh, Random Acoustic Thoughts. Big up 86 in chat. Shout out to Random Acoustic Thoughts. Give him a like and follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. Random is talking about a lot of good stuff going on in the sport of boxing right now, including a lot of good detail on the great Sam Langford and a number of the other top black heavyweights from that period. So salute to Random. And Random's about to be joining us here in a minute. Of course, the Boz, the boxing chick. Be sure to check out the Boz. Give him a like and subscribe. He holds it down, does his thing. He actually has a live that he does on his channel as well during the week. So be sure to check that out. And if you speak a little bit of Norwegian, then even the better. You know, I don't, but I'm gonna learn at some point. I plan on it at least. Armstrong was a fine pugilist. Yes, yes, indeed. Not the most technical of boxers, Armstrong, that is. But that being said, he had to learn on the job, and sometimes when you had to learn on the job, you know, you had to go through some things, and he had to go through some things. You know, he had to learn the hard way, but it is what it is. We've seen many great champions because of such. But hey, check this out. We're gonna bring in my man Random Acoustic Thoughts to join in on this discussion, because Random knows how the heavyweight division back during those times was one of the premier divisions in the sport of boxing. The premier division, as a matter of fact, not just one of, it was the premier division. Get no question about it. And of course, we've been blessed with the number of top caliber heavyweights. So you can essentially go through boxing history talking about heavyweights, because it was just that deep and it was that loved of the sport. But anyway, Random Acoustic Thoughts in this thing. My man Bobby holding it down. What's good with you, buddy? Been a minute. How you doing?
Josh City, what's up, brother? How are you, man?
Hey, I'm great. I'm great. You might hear a little background noise getting some work done, but that being said, appreciate you being here. And I know, hey, you're on top, you're on par, you're on top of what was going on during these times as far as the heavyweights, and that being the marquee division. I hope all has been well as well, just thinking about it from a modern time.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, some of the work these guys put in. I just encourage everyone, when you, like, because BoxRec, for all the criticism it receives, is a very convenient way within the records they do have to see the opponent's records approximately, adjusting for fights that might not have made the paper, or fights in private that weren't publicized. Because Joe Gans had fights, the great lightweight genius Joe Gans, he had fights in private that were in the paper. Like, it was like some rich guys are going to host, there's a $2,500 side bet. I think it was Willie Fitzgerald was one of the guys he fought in private. But there's also private stuff that didn't go on. I mean, it depends what state you're in. But just to let you know, so my audio's messed up. I left my headphones at home, so I've got you on speaker. So I'm going to try and mute in time that there's no double. So it's going to make it a little tricky But I would encourage everyone to go to Cyber Boxing Zone. Search for these great early era pugilists. A lot of them have a page. Sorry, something's going down here. Not really, just a siren. Anyway, I'm not even in the city. I'm in the burbs. I can't get away from it. Trouble follows me. But
That's
go to
it.
Cyber Boxing Zone because, like, I'm just real quick. I'm gonna pull it up. Hopefully, it won't crash my browser here. You can still hear me, right, brother?
Oh, hey, I hear you sound good. So yeah, no problem at all right now. Shout out to Cyberboxing Zone.
Yeah, definitely. So for them, they have some undated at the top of the heading. Armstrong worked racing horses before he started boxing. He worked for a man named Al Orth, I think, who owned a large stable of horses in Minneapolis. They have his first fight, 1893, Bill Crockett in Des Moines, Iowa, first round KO. But it's undated. But then they have September 11th, 1893, second round KO, also Des Moines. So I just came into the chat. I was running late, right at the point where you were saying Choynski might not have been his first fight. So you take into account the fact that guys were fighting. There's money to be made, even if it's just a little bit of money. It's better than the manual labor, and
And I
that's what.
pulled that up here, random. I pulled that up on the screen as well, just to give people an idea. So I pulled up the Cyberboxing Zone, and salute to Zone. Outside of Box Rec, they include a ton of the other stuff that took place, like the exhibitions and those types of fights that would have been in or around just what was considered to be their official fight record. So great point in shouting them out there, random.
Yes, that's the part of the show I missed. My fault. See, the great minds think alike. Yeah, but so I generally do that. Like I'll search BoxRec because it is very convenient, and they've got information about who the ref was, which helps in determining like certain refs in the early era had a preference for draws. They were like, if you don't clearly win, I don't care how many rounds you won, that's a draw. There are a lot of draws on these guys' records. So in the early era, sometimes, unless there's a robbery draw, you have that. You have guys even being, about this 86. Guys win and then it's a draw or it's even contractually on occasion. But you got like, if you don't stop him, you lost. Or you don't stop him, it's a draw. Prearranged draws, all kinds of formats. But Armstrong, one thing I just want to give a shout out that is within sort of my realm is, he was working closely with Sam Langford during Sam Langford's glory days, the heavyweight prime. It was him, George Byers, John Liver Davis, and he had different, like all these different opponents the great Sam Langford was fighting. Armstrong was there giving him, because he'd done a lot, and he was a heavy duty cat on multiple levels. This guy deserves a great deal of respect, and not just for his own fighting prowess or his own like additions to the craft, but he was in the corner of arguably the greatest fighting machine that ever lived. So if he's one of the guys, him and George Byers, they should get a lot more credit, I think, as it relates to Sam Langford. But with the internet, Langford, just like myself, people find out about this guy and be like, what the heck? But the people surrounding him were also heavy duty, and Armstrong was part of that texture.
Yeah, without a doubt. There. Shout out to the boss. Says, "Hang on, I'm afraid I'm mixing him up with Bob Montgomery." Bob Montgomery, another top level fighter right there. But certainly not a heavyweight in the sport. But yeah, mixing them up right there with the boss. But it's all good, without a doubt. Get to a couple of comments real quick here. And Flack says, talk about getting thrown in the fire. First fight was with Joe Choynski. Third fight was with Frank Slavin. Yeah, that's pretty crazy to be in with those caliber of fighters that early on. I mean, you didn't really get a break. You didn't get any slack getting up to that point. And Random, you certainly make a great point just in regards to just how these guys operate, and to think that or at least think about the fact that he was involved with Sam Langford. And we know Sam is one of the top boxers that the sport has seen, period, and regarded as the premier boxer, number one all time, a guy who rose from lightweight or generally in or around that weight, below it probably, all the way to heavyweight. And he was able to carry that power and knock out heavyweights. Just think about the fact that he was operating and working with and competing with guys like Bob Armstrong, who I mentioned is an individual who is 6'4", generally 6'3". You see him regarded as that, but 6'3.5". I've seen it vary, but generally 6'3", 6'4" range. and he could get up over 200 pounds. And just think about that and what that meant for a fighter like Sam Langford, who was pretty much seasoned to mix it up with any fighter of any style, any size, any caliber, and all that stuff. And I think that's what helped him to stand out and become the great that he was.
Yeah, absolutely. Like say in 1910, it says there on Cyber, he did an exhibition with Langford and then at least four with Jeffries. So I mean, he was someone who could. I guess complicated, right? The color line and the politics of it. It was sometimes a bargaining tool. Sometimes it was just a way to avoid a certain competitors or a certain competitor. I mean, there's a lot. Or there were guys like Jack O'Brien and one of the Sullivan twins. I think it was Jack Sullivan, who fought across lines, but then at some point later drew the color line because they were trying to get a title shot. There was a lot of politics going on, but a lot of people worked together. A lot of guys learned from each other. It wasn't some like, you know, black on white, like football game and there's all this black team over here and white. It's not like that. Boxing in this time, a lot of people were learning from a lot of people. Jack Johnson famously learned from Joe Choynski after he got sparked by him. They got arrested and he learned some more of the craft from this great fighter. There was a lot of that going on. Bob Armstrong was part of that texture. Not everyone stayed in the game, but guys like Bob Armstrong, George Byers, Jack Blackburn, some of these guys fought respectably epic careers and then went on to be heavy duty, passing it on to later generations. Because like just briefly, when, Joe Louis was the hot stuff in the 30s, like he was a throwback fighter in a way because Blackburn was old school. Blackburn was competing, before Langford. Langford debuted in 1902. Blackburn was already fighting then when he in his Langford's debut season. So like he was old school. He was of that era. He was someone who got in the ring with a lot of great fighters. And Armstrong, to his credit, he was someone who could walk in these different circles. I've seen pictures in the archives like this some sort of thing in Maine. There's all these fancy dressed up white people, and then Bob Armstrong, boom, he's right there too. Because he's a celebrity fighter, so he could walk in different circles. That wasn't easy to do. Langford was very easygoing, they say. In sort of like amid all that chaos, Johnson was a little more grating on people. Which he had every right to be, but so the degree to which but Johnson also fought across racial lines, and he got Tommy Burns his biggest purse of his life, 30,000, a record for a single fighter. I'm not sure who broke that record. I know that one of the fights between Joe Gans and Battling Nelson set a record for the lighter weights for the purse. But I'm not sure how long Tommy Burns. Johnson probably smashed that record.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Fight. Wasn't Johnson 60 grand guaranteed for the Jeffries fight?
But
plus some other
big
stuff.
time.
Yeah, so he smashed it, but Burns set the record to fight Johnson. So credit to Tommy Burns, because like you were saying I heard you mention, heavyweight's the premier division. I mean, it's the premier thing in sports. Is like who's the toughest top man? Who's the top man in the whole planet? What's the best of the biggest guys?
Yeah,
because they'd had different size disparities, and sometimes guys could do well. You said Charlie Mitchell gave a good fight to Sullivan. Giving up a lot of size, at least for a time. Langford gave a decent first 4 rounds against Jack Johnson before it turned sharply against him, giving up a ton of weight. So like size disparities but like these top fighters, they learned from getting their asses kicked. They learned and evolved. And so like the lessons that Armstrong and Byers had learned, that was passed on to Langford. I think Jimmy Walsh was more of a contemporary of Langford's. He was great bantamweight, but he was more Langford's contemporary. But Byers and Armstrong, they'd seen it already. I'm wandering a little bit. I'm about to go into work in about 20 minutes, but I just woke up, so I'm wandering around. But like, there was a couple points in there,
No, it's all good. It's all good, Random, and we're gonna get you back on, man. Yeah. I know you gotta go up in there, but we'll be back on tomorrow. Hopefully, I can get you on tomorrow. We're gonna be talking about and this for everyone. We're gonna be talking about the July 4th fights that have taken place, but really it kind of just looks at the Jack Johnsons and Jack Dempsey's, but we'll welcome whatever other fights that took place during that period. I know that Benny Leonard fought a famous fight on July 4th once, but certainly Random. We want to keep you in the mix here. Hey, I appreciate you, taking the time right now here for, for us to talk about it. So sharing some great knowledge there. Again, everyone check out Random Acoustic Thoughts. Be sure to like, subscribe, because great content just in general on the history of the sport. And I think we all here love the history of the sport. So it'll be great to check him out and some of the great detail that he's put into getting things to where they are right now. Of course, I know that we have a series, and you can see it on this channel. Primarily, we're talking about the great Harry Wills. It's like a 5-6 part video series. It's all in a playlist, but go check it out on this channel without a doubt, because I think you will enjoy it. You want to know about Harry Wills, just kind of how he got his start and where he ended up and why he was regarded as one of the top boxers in the history of the sport, or one of the top heavyweights without a doubt in the history of the sport, who doesn't quite get the accolades that he may deserve. Then you will certainly find it during that series. Now, real quick, a couple of comments. My man Dan says Jesse James was there in Mississippi City. He was wanted at the time. Without a doubt, that shows you the level of interest in that Sullivan versus Kilrain fight right there. So you make a great point right there. Dan, appreciate you always sharing some love. My man, the Boz there says, gave his super chat to Sammy the Bull. Sammy the Bull, what's going on with you, Boz? Hold up, we can't live that down right there. Why give anything to Sammy the Bull? Come on, we're talking.
Yo, man, he got money. What you doing, boss? 86, man. He ain't got money.
You can't live that down.
You can't live that down, buddy. No, why? No, don't do that again. No. Tell Sammy to come see me. Y'all understand? Don't come to me.
Yo, 86. You just flashed the thing about, yeah, there it is. You know what? I've got a couple clippings that might help with that.
Okay.
Busted in the bathroom in New York. I got some of the records of Gans, what stuff he had booked in private, side bets. Joe Gans fought a lot, and he made a tremendous amount of money because he fought so much. So even though other guys had bigger purses, he was still generating money. But, it was tough on boxers, man, to split with management and getting screwed. And if you're a great colored fighter, like Gans didn't always get the biggest purse, even though he was the top guy. It's just how it went sometimes.
Yeah, great point right there. So Flack, salute to Flack and Randall. Yeah, Flack, hey, he's knowledgeable of the history. He's been in the mix for sure. And we need to do a video on that. We can probably do it on your channel as well, Random. So we can definitely make that happen without a doubt. So I think that would be good to kind of touch on and focus on some of those fights, because we know that there were a lot of them, and even a ton of rumors surrounding some of the matchups we wanted to see in history that may have taken place in private. But that aside, we know that there were those that did for sure take place in private. So it's one of those things without a doubt. So I know Random is down for it without a doubt. So we can make it happen.
There are instances in like the late 1800s, the very end of the 1800s, where people are getting busted in certain cities where they either have regulations or they don't allow boxing, or they're running it privately. It's like Andy Watson. When I was researching Langford and I wanted to know more about Andy Watson, so separate from BoxRec, I start looking in the newspapers, and I found, I assume it's the same guy, but he got in trouble in Philly for being involved. They got arrested and charged. I don't know how it was done in the end, like how it was resolved or not, but he was someone who promoted in Boston. He taught at a time, I think in 1903 or 4, he got the boxing instructor at Harvard position. He fought a lot of prearranged draws. He promoted fights, but he was running stuff in private. So I'll pull those clippings as well, because I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. The only other Andy Watson I found at that time, it was in the papers, was some sort of criminal down south, something that went down, unrelated apparently.
It is always interesting when you're searching for specific names and you pull up some of the other names that were pretty much the same or whatever, that were involved in a number of other things. I've run across that as well. Pretty cool.
You want to hear a crazy one real quick?
Yeah.
So I was researching Jack Blackburn. So there was a famous Kentucky Jack Blackburn, like in the papers, I guess a bull or something. I don't know. They were, and I was like, what? But then while I was looking for that, I found out that Jack Blackburn, had a brother Fred, which I've since heard in other people's stuff. But sometimes you find out like little weird stuff, like Joe and Belfield Walcott. There was a third brother who planned to
Oh
come
yeah.
over and box, but I don't know if he ever boxed. I
Oh
haven't gotten
wow.
that
See, I
far
didn't
because
know there was a third brother.
there was a third brother apparently. Like so sometimes, or like everyone knows Jack Dempsey. Well, his brother was involved in his career. Like
Oh yeah, that is right. Yeah.
it's not always in a modern time. The great Gegard Mousasi, the mixed martial artist, but
Mm-hmm.
also amateur boxer and professional kickboxer, but the great Gegard Mousasi, Dutch fighter. Um, his brother does his social media and stuff a lot of the time.
Mm. Oh
So
yeah, you
people are
know
like
what?
yelling at his brother. He's like, whatever, because he's living his life too. He doesn't always like fixate on social media, but so it's like people don't always realize like the connections and how things are interconnected in a glorious historic sport like this. The lineage is rich, and it doesn't take too many leaps. Even if you just have people who are in a photo together, like you can go from Jem Mace to Sam Langford to Joe Louis, a couple steps, and now you're at someone who won the championship in the 30s. You got all the way from Jem Mace all the way to Joe Louis. As far as guys who
Yeah.
knew each other, it's very quick, and suddenly you're here today.
Yeah.
You take the shortcuts too, because you can just be like Bert Sugar. Okay, how many years was he in the thing?
Right.
But even just with fighters and coaches, there's a rich lineage, and I feel like Floyd Mayweather is one of the great modern boxers. His
Mm-hmm.
advantage is he knows a lot of those old school tricks.
Oh
He
yeah.
understands it. Tyson was someone in his
Come from a
prime
boxing family,
when he was focused. Yeah, Tyson was studied. He knew the
without a
stuff. He
doubt.
was obviously a heavyweight, so not all of his idols were heavyweights. But
Yeah.
these guys know it. So Floyd, yes, he's great. Would he thrive in other eras when you have busier schedules and you couldn't pick your fights? I don't know. He's a great fighter, but a lot of that old school stuff, that shoulder roll, man. There's Dave Holly's doing the shoulder roll in 1900.
Oh yeah.
Floyd killed it and made $1 billion or whatever dollars with some of the same
And I
kinds of
opened it
techniques.
random real quick. I actually opened up this broadcast, or however you want to classify it, but I opened it up by saying that the styles that we are familiar with now, and that long in a roundabout way, but essentially saying that there isn't a style that we've seen here in modern times that didn't come from the past. These guys in the past were as scientific, and they were putting these techniques in place even back then in some of the older times. So there's no new invention of a style and all of that stuff. It all dates back. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, and it's cyclical. It comes back. Styles come back in fashion, just like the way fighters like to pose changes over time. Like some people are fooled because they see that underhand, like sort of pose like Armstrong's doing here. But that was like very much a bare knuckle pose. It wasn't the only pose but that was one of the popular poses that stuck around into the gloved era. But that doesn't mean that that's how guys were gonna like. It's not new to keep your hands up, or if you have them down, it's to generate leverage and power, like Gene Tunney and some of these fighters who would sometimes have Joe Calzaghe would do it, punch you from the floor. He wasn't even particularly hard hitter, although it added up. But he put his hands down. One of my favorite moments, and I know it's going to get some of the Americans salty, but sorry, fellas, but him absolutely clown. They were both, past their prime, but clowning Roy Jones Jr., man, just sticking his head right in his guard. Go ahead and
Yeah,
punch me.
Dan
Then
was mentioned that without a doubt.
it's like my favorite. It's my second favorite Calzaghe fight, my second favorite fight of all time. But my favorite's him just spanking the prime out of Jeff Lacey. Because of everything, But the Roy Jones fight, yeah, you see, you can do that. It can be done. Some of these clever fighters, they can mess with you. Langford do it. Not everyone's formulaic, and it all been tried and weeded out. And, sometimes people have to switch it up. Like Rocky Marciano had really short arms, so he had to do it a little different at heavyweight.
But yeah, hey, good stuff without a doubt. That is funny stuff right there. Just thinking about it, But we were talking about Jones and Calzaghe with Dan. Of course, Dan was mentioning it and everything. But good stuff without a doubt. And of course, the boss says Battle Royal makes me think of the video games. Hey, it should be noted to point out in relation to Bob Armstrong, king of the Battle Royal. Now, Battle Royals, those were the types of contests where they would put these fighters in the ring. They would oftentimes be blindfolded, and they would have to go about just swinging and dishing it out until it was a last man standing type situation. And of course, as you can expect, that had to be pretty hectic. It had to be pretty damaging, etc. So he was considered to be the king of the battle royals. This was often some of the black fighters during that period. And I know if you check on the channel of, say, for instance, Scrapbook Boxing, he dives into it a bit more. But there have been a number of boxers from that period who participated in that, who, of course, reached that sort of recognition status, that superstar status. George Dixon being one. I believe Joe Gans participated in them, etc. But that's why Bob Armstrong got the name King of the Battle Royal. And as mentioned, he is one of those big guys, as mentioned, between 6'3", 6'4", somewhere in that range. And we know that he was one of those guys who was super powerful, strong, and where he lacked in technique, he made up for just with his sheer veracity as a human and a person in a fighting situation. So I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, it was hard times. Guys had to go through a lot at times and walk into fights where they're uncertain what exactly was happening. Having a good second. I guess they say Jack Blackburn always carried a straight razor with him. He wasn't playing, but he was a product of those times, those dangerous times when you might be set upon, especially if you were as good as Jack Blackburn. So it's today. It's not the fighters are soft; they're incredibly tough and driven, but it's just a less dangerous life than some of these guys had to deal with. So when you talk about being the toughest amongst really tough, hardened generations of like lower class, like poor people, you're talking about some insanely tough people. It's and the standards were high for boxing, even considering how tough life was at the time. So, when people stood out, they really stood out for good reason. They weren't. You couldn't really fake it in these times, and the press wasn't on your side anyway. Gonna change your last name. Bob Choynski actually has a nice ring to it.
Bob Choynski, that'll be a good thing right there, Bob. Representing. Hey, for those who are into the history of boxing, you'll know what it means right there. With tough fighter right there, skilled fighter who's in with some of the best. Flag Boxing says a lot of great fighters came up from battle royals. Without a doubt, just mentioned a little bit of it. Without a doubt, there, Flag. I know you're on game. Without a doubt. The Bob says Blackburn is a cool name indeed. Indeed, the great Jack Blackburn kind of would be world champion. He never won a world title, but certainly one of the greatest boxers in the history of the sport. Dan says, great position, random. You notice Dempsey always Bill Tate in this corner. That was his main sparring partner, handsome man Tate. So, yeah, big Bill Tate, 6'6", 240 plus, one of those big dudes. So it kind of trumps the notion that only the big guys are fighting now, but back then they had big guys who were competing for sure.
That's right. And some of them didn't necessarily have as much stopping power as others. Like Jess Willard was a huge guy, right? Not necessarily thought of as a huge puncher. He was a very durable character, but then there were guys like Fred Fulton, who was, he took one of Sam Langford's eyes in 1917. He had a whole bunch of wins, mostly knockouts, although he did lose to, greats like Jack Dempsey and Harry Wills. But surrounding those fights, he had a whole ton of winning. A lot of stoppages. Fred Fulton was a big, tall fella. But I think, so I think when we're thinking about like the craft, right, folks, the skill of boxing, like not everyone got the same opportunity. Some of these guys were sparring partners for the champion, couldn't get a fight with the champion, and went maybe even after the champion lost the fight. Sometimes it was. I'm trying to think back. I think it was Bob Armstrong himself was fighting Denver Ed Martin. And they wanted to challenge the winner of Fitz and Jeffries. They were fighting for the color championship. Fitz and Jeffries were fighting for the what at that time was the white championship. So like these fighters were around later on to see, like when Jack Johnson actually, got his opportunity because he was so good, and the public, especially in Australia, really wanted that fight. So the purse was big enough to entice Burns to put up the world title. Burns had a ton of fights because he won the belt off, without getting too deep into it. A couple guys fought for the the vacant title after Jeffries retired. In the next fight, Burns got it. He fought a ton of times, right? Not always the highest level competition. Some of them were very high level. Then he did unify with Johnson. So even though he got the payday, he also put up that thing. A lot of people weren't happy with him for it, but money talks, and the color line. Sometimes the risk was too much because the heavyweight champs, can make a lot of money outside of just my making appearances, theater hall stuff, sparring exhibitions, little challenges like, oh, can you last 4 rounds with me, stuff like that. So it took an awful lot of money, but fighters could be enticed in the biggest fights. Like the great Joe Gans, who we mentioned, there was a thing about a white lightweight championship over on the west coast of California. Gans was based in Baltimore. And I guess Jimmy Britt was claiming it at the time, and his family was connected in California, and they were threatening to do ban interracial fights in California if Gans pressed the issue. But I think then Britt then lost to, it might have been Nelson, actually, battling Nelson. But anyway, he lost his sort of claim, and later the fights did get made. The excuse is like, sometimes it's genuine, sometimes it changes over time when the guys are like, oh shoot, now I really need this money. We can do this. Like Jeffries, he turned down a lot of fights, he retired. But then later he needed that money. He needed all that money he was going to get from the fight with Johnson. So he came out, lost 100 pounds, got his butt kicked. It caused all kinds of horrible repercussions from the racist part of the American public. Not necessarily the fight fans, but it's the people who are actually paying attention to boxing because of the racial overtones. Couldn't handle it that Jack Johnson was that good. Nowadays, so like however bad it is nowadays, no, we get a lot of these guys get their credit. They get a little smack talk, but it's not like where there's still people walk around like you're not even a man. Like there's very little of that comparatively. But like in these sort of like post-Reconstruction times, yeah, man, people were literally fighting for the right to be seen as people. So the top boxers, this was a way out for the underclass in general, but especially for like black fighters. They were living it up. Sam Langford, man, he did die broke, but he spent an awful lot of money, man. He loved to dress, and he loved cigars and booze and being generous. And so there was money. This was a way guys could be a celebrity. Jack Johnson exemplifies that. He went on the celebrity tour. He's like, I'm not taking that fight with Langford. Stick the contract where the sun doesn't shine. I'm going back to America. I'm going to go live it up. I'm the man now. So it's not new. So this stuff with Fury, he's going to fight somebody, he's not going to fight someone. The stated reasons might have changed, but it's nothing new where the guy's like, well, I've got this claim and I can make a ton of money and I might get my butt kicked. So maybe I should just keep doing what I'm doing and post to Twitter. It's whatever though. Okay. So that's probably the end of my rant because I probably do need to go to work. I appreciate you having me, brother. It's an interesting time. I had to jump on. I didn't have a lot to say because I only know of Armstrong sort of peripherally because he was, passing his prime when Langford was still at the lower weights. They joined up later on. So, but I just wanted to throw in some 2 cents. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to Scrapbook Boxing and the Boxing Librarian especially. And let's talk we'll talk later on about finding a time to do that live chat.
Without a doubt,
Private fights.
Without a doubt. Appreciate you being here, buddy, as always. So certainly we will connect. And thank you for sharing that great knowledge. Again, people, give them a like and subscribe. Random Acoustic Thoughts. I'm telling you, if you want to know about the history, check them out. Especially if you want to dive into Sam Langford and some of his greatest rivals. Random Acoustic Thoughts is the way to go. There are others out there who have some content, but my go-to is Random without a doubt. And he does Bellator MMA as well. So if you're into MMA, and I occasionally try and drop in and check them out myself, and I've learned a great deal. Him and Jay Wolf, they always do a show covering the pre and post events for Bellator. So Random.
Yeah, this next one you'll probably be on the replay team because this is the same day as Spence Crawford.
Oh yeah,
They're going to Japan. Right. Bellator's going to Japan, so I'm going to do it in reverse. But I'll be on the replay crew for Spence Crawford. I'm excited for that fight, though. Look at that. Boxing got it done.
On 29th right there. So certainly.
All right, I'm out. Lotus.
Appreciate you, Random. Appreciate you, everybody. All right, so Random Acoustic Thoughts, everyone. As mentioned, give them a like and subscribe. Always dropping a bunch of good knowledge. Tim Wild says a lot of pictures of Bob and Jeffries. What notice is how well they were built. Both monsters, without a doubt. Yeah, these are two big guys. Certainly, Armstrong had a couple of inches on Jeffries, but Jeffries, as you know, a massive guy. As far as mass, yeah, Jeffries was a bigger guy. He was bigger mass wise than Armstrong. So best believe that could play a role in dividends in the sport just in general when you're competing. And you think about those fights that went the distance, especially considering that back then you had a lot of fights that were scheduled for 20 plus rounds, and Jeffries was one of those guys who had the mass, the size overall, and he had the endurance to carry him beyond what would be the modern time frame as far as rounds limits, 12 rounds, etc. So Jeffries going deep into fights, that was not a problem for him. So you have to certainly factor that in when thinking about the great James J. Jeffries. And he's one of the best who have competed in the sport. And he was the man at the time holding the heavyweight title when he did. So salute to James J. Jeffries, but Bob Armstrong, one of his prime premier sparring partners during that period. And I think that speaks volumes in itself. Flag Boxing says in the whole argument of malnutrition in the early era is completely irrelevant with guys who are built like tanks. Most certainly, there were guys who were built like tanks. It wasn't just a situation or a matter in which you just had some guys who weren't, who didn't weigh a ton, who were just fighting in a weight class and they were below the weight. Certainly, you had guys who were prime and ready to take the throne as the top dogs, and they had the size and mass and overall to go with it. Bob Armstrong is one of those guys without a doubt, and you see it just given his sheer size. So it will be comparable with a lot of the heavyweights we've seen. It could get above 200 pounds. So think about Alexander Usyk. He's about 6'3", 220, somewhere in that range. He came from cruiserweight. He has 3 of the belts right now, 3 of the major belts. And he took out Anthony Joshua, who's 6'6", 240, 250 plus pounds. So that goes to show you that we have examples of this stuff happening. We have it here in modern times, so best believe it happened in historic times as well. So nothing is new. As I said, that's why I love the boxing history. It kind of trumps the fact that, hey, everything right now isn't some new invention. It isn't some new time or we're not in some new phase. No, this stuff was apparent and very much the case back then as well. All you have to do is dig through, read through some of the papers, etc., and you'll find out firsthand that, hey, there's nothing new that is taking place right now. The rules may change. As we know, we're not fighting 15 rounds anymore. We're not fighting 20, 25, or dare I say 45 rounds anymore. So those type of things change. But when it comes to the sport and the technique in itself, there's nothing new. Believe me, there's nothing new. It is what it is. Sammy's on patrol. On parole. Oh, he needs money. Okay, I got you. The vibes. Okay, you're gonna rock with Sammy. Hey, tell Sammy I said, hey, if he wants to box, let's make it happen. I'm ready to go. I'm ready for one of those YouTube boxing matches. We can do it on the zone. So tell Sammy I said, what's up? I'm ready to go right there. The vibes. Let's make it happen. Then they ate light and stayed light. Dempsey ate 1 egg, 1 slice dry, wheat toast breakfast. Okay, that's what's up right there, Dan. Good stuff right there. Nutrition. Of course, they had nutritionists back then as well. We talk about the nutrition all the time, but hey, these guys, they had to fight to eat too. You know, they had to fight. Hey, I got to keep food on the table, so I got to do what I got to do, without a doubt. Hunger makes you tough. It certainly does. We know about Dempsey being a hobo, jumping across train to train. He was just out there trying to make it happen. He was trying to get whatever dollar he can get, trying to get a buck and come up. Get a buck and come up. Hey, big time. Flat boxing reminds me of what Jack Kern screaming at Dempsey to get back in the ring in the Willard fight. LMAO. Yeah, without a doubt. Dempsey thought it was over. Dempsey did think it was over. Of course, Dempsey, one of my favorite heavyweights, one of my favorite boxers in general of all time. And man, that Willard fight, that was one of the fights that got me into boxing history in general. Just seeing Dempsey, just that pure destruction of Jess Willard. Excuse me. And we've had varying conversations, varying things that are out there in relation to that fight, but let it be known, you can see it right there firsthand in 1919, July 4th, Toledo, Ohio. You could see firsthand that Dempsey, he was better than Jess Willard. Quite frank, we have rumors and all of that stuff thrown around surrounding the fighting itself, or the gloves, or this, that, and whatnot. Come on, you can look at that video and you can just tell that Dempsey, he came in there as a man possessed. He was coming away the victor regardless of the situation. And Willard, never known to be some guy who was technical. He was big, strong. He could have some endurance. He was tough. And that helped him get to the point where he was able to knock out Jack Johnson, of course. But that being said, he was not stopping or dealing with Jack Dempsey on that day there in Toledo, Ohio. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more tomorrow. So be sure to join in for that. So I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Dempsey ruled him on that day, and nothing would have changed such. Timing is everything. Timing is everything. And he picked the wrong guy that he thought was going to be an easy victor or easy victory. You know, he should have faced Fred Fulton, who I think would have beat him at some point during that period. If you don't know, check out the video we have on the great Fred Fulton, the Minnesota plasterer or the Rochester plasterer. But that being said, Dempsey would have lost that title, or not, my apologies, not Dempsey, but Willard would have lost that title had he fought Fred Fulton prior to fighting Jack Dempsey. So, you know, it is one of those things. But check out Fred Fulton. We have a video on the channel. You need to check it out if you don't know of him or don't know who he is. It'll be worthwhile, without a doubt. Trust me when I tell you, it will be worthwhile. Anyway, let's get going on this. Salute to Rodolfo Rivera Jr. Rodolfo, I saw your message earlier talking about you had to do work. Hold up, work does not come into play right now, Rodolfo. You told me earlier that you were going to be game and in the mix, Rodolfo. So I feel that you are pushing me to the back right now, Rodolfo. I know you've seen some other lives. There's been some other guys. Did you see Showbiz or something like that going live or whatever, Rodolfo? Why me? Why do you have to do work while you're supposed to talk to me, Rodolfo? Come on now. I'm not taking that lying down. We're going to have a word or two. Hey, you were my man, Rodolfo, but come on. I don't need that right now. No, that is not the way it's going to go. Come on, Rodolfo. We need you here right now. Flat Boxer says a lot of great fighters came up from Battle Royals. Without a doubt, there were a ton of them. Of course, Bob Armstrong being one of them, considered the king of the Battle Royals, given his size and all of that stuff tied to it. For sure, that could be one that is worth mentioning. But there were several others, without a doubt. A lot of the fighters, especially some of the black fighters who came up during that period, they had to go through those types of situations during their period. So it's one of those things. Battle Royals, a bit barbaric in some capacity, without a doubt. Gladiatorish, you know. But that being said, not with swords and everything, but certainly on the gladiator type level in terms of just thinking about, hey, we're going to throw guys in a pit or whatever it may be and just have them duke it out, especially when you add blindfolds to the mix. Varying sizes and all that stuff. So, king of the Battle Royal, Bob Armstrong. So, he withstood whatever adversity he had to go through to get to the point of being the withstander in what would be considered a Battle Royal type fight. Crazy to think about, but hey, it wasn't crazy back in the day. Bob says Blackburn is a cool name indeed. Certainly it is. Dan says, great point, Random. You notice Dempsey always... yeah. Oh, we did touch on this a bit. Bill Tate. Yeah, big Bill Tate, without a doubt. Tim Wild, a lot of pictures of Bob, Jeffries. Let me see. I think I went a little bit back. I went a little bit back. Let me go down right here. Blackburn, a good fighter. Floyd used flat boxing. Floyd used some of that crouching escape from the pocket that Marciano often used. Yeah, without a doubt. It's not anything new. If you dig back into history and we have some of it on video, then you'll see that none of this was like some grand new invention. But you look at some channels, you look at some individuals and how they explain things, they'll make you believe such. But yeah, I haven't seen anything here in 2023 that is new or anything different than anything I've seen in the past prior to 2023, January 3rd or July 3rd to be exact. I haven't seen anything beyond such. So that tells you that, yeah, you can have a lot of different things, a lot of different thoughts and comments out there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. It does not. It does not. Rodolfo Rivera Jr., you got music taste. I guess he does. I guess Miles has a little bit of music taste. Salute to Alan. Says like Fury. Salute to you, Alan. Appreciate you being here, Alan. Been a minute. Good stuff right there, Alan. Appreciate you dropping by, showing love as always. Salute and shout out to everyone in the mix right now. Be sure to give them a like and subscribe. Alan holding it down, doing his thing. Always love to have the dialogue, Alan. So keep it coming, buddy. The bio says like Tim Witherspoon, he between 6'3", 6'4" was. Yeah, somewhere in that mix right there. Somewhere in the mix. Salute to my man, Bruce Gas, Boxing Jazz, and more. If you haven't followed Bruce Gas, do so now. If you haven't subscribed to Bruce Gas, do so now. It's someone worth checking out without a doubt. Very entertaining, a lot of good content, a lot of good interviews, etc. on his channel. So big up and salute to my man, Bruce Gas, Boxing Jazz, and more. You can't go without saying, without a doubt. The boss says, just read Jim Jeffries said Choynski hit him the hardest. Wouldn't be the first. Would not be the first right there, boss. Choynski, hey, he hit a lot of people pretty hard. And we know he knocked out Jack Johnson, so that tells you a great deal right there. So he most certainly would not be the first. So that tells you everything you need to know right there. The great Joe Choynski, one of the great fighters in history, would be light heavyweight champion. I mean, if you don't know of Joe Choynski, get to know. And of course, on the 86 Boxing channel, we do have a video of the great Joe Choynski. So check him out right now. It doesn't matter. Check him out right now. Hey, I'm not mad about it. Whatever you got to do what it do. Dan says, I first heard about Blackburn from an old timer, my friend's grandfather from Pittsburgh. He was about 88 years old and this was 50 years ago. He called him Blackjack Blackburn. Okay, that's big time right there. Nothing like the history being passed down word to mouth, firsthand. Nothing like that. Salute to you, Dan. Everyone, salute to Dan. Dan, you are appreciated. Everyone go give him a like, subscribe, and follow, all of that good stuff. Dan shares a ton of great knowledge right here. It goes beyond just the individual. It goes beyond multiple eras. And that's what makes the history of boxing so great, is that we can pull in those type of connections right there. You see that story right there? You're not getting that everywhere. You're getting that right here, right now. So, Dan, salute to you, man. That's big time right there. I mean, you can only get that knowledge from people of that time who are heard it from someone of that time, passed down on and on and on. I mean, hey, such an honor to have you here and share that type of story, Dan. I mean, that can't be replicated, duplicated, or anything of that nature. You just had to hear it firsthand from the person right then and there. So I appreciate you, Dan, for sharing such a great story. Again, salute to Dan, always holding it down with a lot of great knowledge. Give him a like, subscribe, and follow. He may be throwing some new videos into the mix himself here very soon. So, Dan, hey, I appreciate you. And of course, I have your back. So if you need anything from my end, I got you. I got you without a doubt. Salute to Dan. Fulton was listed at 6'5.5" on one site. Was to box rex list him as 1 inch shorter. Yeah, you have those variations with some of the boxers and their heights. think about Gogia Me Too. I have a video out there, 86 Boxing Channel, Gogia Me Too, the Romanian giant. And I remember just in researching it, you had him listed as tall as 8 foot plus to, of course, the lower 7 foot range. But we settled on 7'4" because that seemed to be more in the range that seemed to make sense. And based on some of the reporting of the time, that seemed to be the range that was more recorded definitively. But you had some listing him as 8 foot plus, which is pretty crazy. Just think about that. So you could have some discrepancies and variances there, even with some of the most famous fighters that we know of. Flag Boxing BL is against that nickname. got you without a doubt there, Flag Boxing. Now it's all you random. Let's go with the Bulls. The Bulls. Dan says he just got out of prison. World War I was breaking out. Hero of World War I, General Blackjack Pershing. Good stuff there, Dan, sharing that knowledge. 1914 in Pittsburgh. And we know Pittsburgh is a fighting town. That is a fighting city. I've been there myself once, and I enjoyed it. Dropped by this spot called Permanente Brothers. Now, I had seen it on Man vs. Food, and they have this sandwich that is pretty cool. They put coleslaw and fries on the sandwich, and I went there twice, as a matter of fact, my girlfriend and I, and it was good. We enjoyed it. So shout out to Pittsburgh, industrial town, I guess, in some sense. But that being said, it had a feel-good spirit to it. Even seeing some of the downtown on the little strip or whatever the area where they have bars and different things, it was pretty nice. So got a love for Pittsburgh. So salute to Pittsburgh. And we know that's the home of, dare I say his name? Dare I say his name? This guy known as the Pittsburgh Windmill. I'll just leave it there. Pittsburgh Windmill. Google it, folks. The bot says, Cali Behan was a garbage man. LOL. Just happened to mention that I know Jim Braddock did various jobs, but I don't think he ever did that. Okay, I don't know Cali. I know of Willie Meehan. Hey, but Braddock, yeah, he had to do what he had to do for sure. He went through some tough and rugged times. Salute to Jim Braddock, James J. Braddock. He's another one of those James J's that was out there. And the thing about him is, man, he had a very tough career, tough competition, tough times, tough circumstances. But don't doubt for a second, he was one of the great fighters in history. I mean, tough, rugged, could box. He was skilled and all that stuff. He just went up against some pretty bad times. And Cinderella Man, that's what you know him as, and that's for good reason. Of course, he was the man for a short period there, winning that world heavyweight title. But my man, the great Max Baer, who I always bring this book up, the magnificent Max Baer, the Livermore Larriper. But that being said, James J. Braddock, really a light heavyweight. He rose, of course. But if you think about the best boxers, just in general, competitors in the sport, James J. Braddock is one of those. All wins and losses are not created equal. So when you look at his record, you may think one thing, but don't think for a second that truly defines how great of a fighter that James J. Braddock was, because he was without a doubt one of the great fighters in the history of the sport. And I don't need to say any more about that. You check out the Cinderella Man, read the book, watch the movie, etc. But you'll find out firsthand. Dan says Harry Greb was his favorite. I knew about Greb 50 years ago. Okay, that's good stuff right there, Dan. See, salute to Dan, just dropping that knowledge, those gems, those nuggets. You can't get those any and everywhere, but you can get it here. You can get it here, I must say. Salute to Dan, sharing that knowledge, sharing that love right there. I mean, Dan, I don't know. I can't even thank you. I can't thank you enough for that, sharing these type of historic recollections. And I'll say that there was someone who commented on my channel before, who had interaction with their grandfather, talking about the great Harry Greb, since you brought it up there, Dan. And I remember them saying that their grandfather felt that Harry Greb's style, or at least he compared his style to that of Henry Armstrong. So this was someone who had seen him in person and live. I can't remember exactly who the person was that was sharing this information with me too, but it's amazing some of the people you run into and some of the information that is shared there as it relates to boxing history. But he shared that information with me, and I thought that was just great, classic, timeless type stuff. So that gives you sort of an idea. But we all know that Henry Armstrong was one of those busy fighters who had an unlimited motor for the most part and would just continue to throw punches throughout the duration of a fight. Just think about Graham and what we know of him, bounces in and out. Unlimited motor, threw a ton of punches and all that stuff. It may not have looked exactly identical, but that gives you kind of a sense. And then just thinking about what we read on him, you can kind of start to piece some things together. So some of those stories, it's great to have those stories, some of that information to be shared. And I appreciate you, Dan, for sharing such. It's here now, Bob. It's here. It's here, Bob. It happened. Alexander Campbell, Ulster Scott. Salute to you, Alexander. Alexander the Great. Appreciate you being here, buddy. Without a doubt. Luther McCarthy was a great big old time fighter, 6'4", 240. He would have beaten Willard and probably fought in Johnson instead. Good stuff. Hey, I have no doubt about it. I mentioned Fred Fulton for sure. He was someone that I think would have beat Jess Willard at that time. And Fred Fulton, interestingly enough, went against a number of guys who were some big guys as well. And he was able to stand out in that regard. So Luther McCarthy, I don't know Luther McCarthy myself specifically, but I'm going to look into him now that you shared that, Alexander the Great. I appreciate you dropping that knowledge, that info. So that is good stuff right there. That's good to know. But certainly, contrary to any belief or thought that all the heavyweights back in the day were small, that is not the case. We had some big guys of varying sizes, matching some of the sizes of these guys that we're accustomed to today. So don't think for a second that there weren't guys who would match up with the size of these guys. I told you about Primo Canera, huge dude, 6'6", 240, 50 plus, huge dude. And seeing his casting at the International Boxing Hall of Fame, you can just see the size of this man's fist. So don't think for a second that there weren't any big guys there. There's a famous picture out there with Joe Louis standing next to some of his sparring partners. And these are all guys who are much bigger, some of them much bigger than him. And, you know, Joe Louis is 6'1", 6'2", generally, 200 plus pounds. So that tells you everything you need to know. It didn't just start right then and there. So it's one of those things. So appreciate your love to Rhythm. Rodolfo holding down. Jeffrey was built like a wrestler. Without he was James J. Jeffries. There's a lot of James J's out there for sure. The Bob. Rodolfo says, like a bodybuilder, Bobs, for the first time, for the time. Have you watched any videos of the evolution of bodybuilding? I haven't seen that myself there. That's a good one to check out there, Rodolfo. Hey, you're knowledgeable. Salute to Rodolfo, a knowledgeable individual out there holding it down for the sport. We're in the same boat there. Alexander says McCarthy had been working cowboy. The break was caused from a bucking Mustang. Ooh, he had an 80-inch reach. That's big time right there, 80 inches. So that's a lot of reach to deal with right there. Just thinking about that. Just think about that jab, an 80-inch jab, and trying to get past that, trying to work your way around that. I mean, not easy. Certainly not easy. So got to give it to him. It is something. Rodolfo says those early 1900s bodybuilders would be considered weak these days. They would be. Conditions were different, of course. Conditions were very much different, Rodolfo. But yeah, they might be. They might very well be. You see Usyk, the boss. Usyk. Yes, sir. We were talking about him holding it down right now. One of the top of the division. Going one to the top. Dan says, I like to learn. Some take a while. Certainly, Dan. Hey, I'm right there with you, buddy. Trying to learn more and more myself, to be honest with you. Flat Boxing said, look up when the bench press is invented and look up at the picture of the guy. Dude is a walking brick house. Interesting right there. Interesting, Flat. Canary had 14 pieces of toast, 10 eggs for breakfast. Insane. Blackburn was never nicknamed Chappie as a fighter. That was between him and Lewis. Yep. Making fun of Jack Johnson because he was acting like an Englishman. Chappie. Okay, good stuff right there, Dan. Yeah, I don't remember seeing him mentioned as Chappie in his early days when I was looking at research or doing research on some of his fights and what he was doing during that time. So great point right there, Dan, to mention out. Hey, bodybuilding evolution videos didn't provide the best photos, certainly. And boxing or wrestling played a great role in boxing as well. You think about guys like Frank Gotch, and there were some other wrestlers from around that time. Of course, William Muldoon, who was training John L. Sullivan, but there were others. Wrestling played a great role in boxing. It kind of went hand in hand from a training perspective during those times. So that's something, if you don't know about, certainly worthy of checking out. Salute to my man Beagle47 in the mix. Drive time for the dog in the house listening. Good stuff, fellas. Salute to you, Beagle. Appreciate you being here. Always, Beagle. Always good to show some love. Show some love right there. Beagle, always in the mix. Always in the mix there. Can't believe you don't know of Joe Bosky. Okay, gotcha. Rodolfo, where you at, Rodolfo? We need an Elbows McFadden episode. Hey, we might have to do that right there, Flag Boxing. If you don't know the great George Elbows McFadden, who pretty much invented a defense on his own, and he's someone worth checking out. One of the great boxers to never win a world title. Has win over the likes of Joe Gans. He was in there with Jack Blackburn, I believe, as well. Certainly, we have a video on him out there, 86 Boxing Channel, so be sure to check it out. But Flag Boxing, hey, that one's got to come without a doubt. Matter of fact, it's going on the list. Flag Boxing. So that seems like it's one that, hey, you want to see, maybe the people want to see. George Elbows McFadden. If you don't know him, go ahead and look up some stuff right now. We have a video on him, but hey, he's one that you should know about. Very much one of those top contenders at his time, and there was so much competition that everybody couldn't get a world title. And of course, in the case of him, that was the case. And hey, we're going to talk about him though, because Elbows was an innovator stylistically, so it's worthwhile. But you'll see that he had a pretty tough, solid overall career. So it wasn't just one of those run-of-the-mill type situations. He was actually legit. Could have been world champion. Unquestioned, especially in this multi-belt era, for sure. So pronounced Bashki. Yeah, I don't know, Bashki. Flag Boxing, Mike Gibbons, the greatest boxer ever. How close was my pronunciation? Mike Gibbons is the greatest boxer ever. Good stuff right there. Mike Gibbons, certainly another guy who didn't win a world title, but was very much capable of such. His brother was Tommy Gibbons. He was a middleweight, that is Mike Gibbons, or at least that's where he operated. But certainly one of those guys who was very skilled for his time. There's a video out there of him and Packy McFarland, a fighter who was undefeated in his career. Very good boxer as well. And it's worth checking out. There are probably some videos out there where it's slowed down a bit, the frame rate being adjusted. There are some out there for sure where it's kind of sped up, kind of how it is with some of those older videos. But certainly, Mike Gibbons, someone to get to know, and it'll make you think differently about rating him and Tommy Gibbons, his brother, who was also another great boxer. Just thinking about the history, light heavyweight and heavyweight, who competed against some of the best of the era. But Mike Gibbons, very underrated boxer right there. Flat boxing knows. Gogil was so the boss says Gogil was 7'6", or I don't know. Hey, he had a lot of different weights that were thrown out there. Boz, I go at 7'4", but as mentioned, some consider him to be over 8 feet tall, which is crazy. But hey, you know how rumors and stories get passed about during that period. They're still sub. Willie is Kali's son. Okay. Good stuff. Flat boxer Max Baer had the most insane facial expressions in the Canary murder. He just couldn't stop doing funky faces, without a doubt. That's a very entertaining fight right there. The two were going down left and right. It was just insane. Max Baer was going for the Livermore Lariper, the great Max Baer, Madcap Maxie. I mean, one of the great heavyweights of all time, big time puncher, one of the big time punchers in the history of the sport. And I think you just really gotta learn about Max Baer to really understand the great Max Baer, because it goes deeper than what you think of when you see, like, for instance, James J. Braddock. Because of course, the Cinderella Man, a big piece of that whole situation was the fact that it was James J. Braddock overcoming Max Baer. But there's so much more to Max Baer that you must know about and find about on your own, and then you can make your own judgment on Max Baer as opposed to just kind of what is thrown out there, for sure. So I do recommend that individuals go about that process. Madcap Maxie, as my man Dabad says right there, you already know Madcap Maxie, the clown prince of boxing, true playboy of the sport. I'm telling you, if there was social media around back then, he'd be one of the most recognized boxers in the sport to this day. He is recognized, but even more so because he was just that type of character, that type of entertainer. And man, he just had that personality, just overall, just a natural, funny guy, a natural, nice guy as well. Disregard the view of him being sort of one of these kind of bad guys in the Cinderella movie, or in the Cinderella Man movie. Max was a very nice guy, a very jovial guy. So that is the true Max Baer. And there are documentaries or video, etc., out there that you can look at that will attest to such beyond that movie. So I would say just check that out yourself for sure to get a true understanding of who Max Baer was. Then the old timer loved Greb and Ketchel. Yep. This guy watched Greb and Blackburn live. He was from Pittsburgh. Oh, that's dope right there. Blackburn was fighting out of Pittsburgh after prison. Said he went by the name Blackjack Blackburn. That is right. Blackburn had the distinction of being one of those guys who transcended generations, of course. We know he fought the likes of Sam Langford, fought the likes of Joe Gans, and Harry Greb. Think about that. That's Jack Blackburn for you, one of the most underrated fighters in the history of the sport, never to win a world title. But that's good stuff right there, Dan. Gems right there. Greb and Ketchel, talking about a middleweight clash of all time right there. The great Pittsburgh windmill Harry Greb versus the Michigan assassin Stanley Ketchel. Man, if we could get that fight in some capacity, even some virtual capacity, fantasy matchup style, then I think that will satisfy a lot of people right there, because that's a mouth-watering fight right there. Throw my man Les Darcy in the mix, who we'll do a video on as well. Les Darcy, the Australian middleweight. If you don't know him, check him out. Man, you're talking about to die for right there. That's that type of stuff for sure. Dan says, of course, we're talking about him being Lewis's trainer. Certainly. Jack Blackburn in the Hall of Fame as a trainer. But that being said, he was far more than that. He was certainly a hell of a boxer. If you don't know, now you know. Ketchel looked like he was a healthy 45 years old when he was 24. I got you right there, my man Flack. Ketchel, he was a wild man right there. That was a wild dude for sure. Wild dude. Opium big time, certainly. Rodolfo talking about John Jay's Pershing led the U.S. Expeditionary Forces in World War I and was ordered to find Pancho Villa with 10,000 soldiers, but never found him. Pancho Villa knew how to duck out of there. You know what I'm saying? Don't think that you can just run up on us like that. Jose Santa Camaro was 6'8", 6'9". Oh wow, Ray Impellitteri, I don't know him, 6'7". Interesting right there, Boz. Interesting. Were those guys top level? You know their names, so maybe they are. Dan, San Francisco was the biggest fight town, but Chinatown too. The opium dens were huge. Certainly. San Francisco, that Bay Area was crazy back then, Dan. Very much crazy back then. I know we've talked about it on a number of occasions. There were no steroids then. Yeah, likely not. We've seen evolutions over the course of time, so things have changed. A couple chicks, bottles of whiskey, opium pipe. They had temptation. All of these temptations. You know about that temptation song, don't you, Rodolfo? I sent you that. I did it myself. Temptations. And that too by Rodolfo. Rodolfo, so you still here, Rodolfo? I thought you said you were gonna go study. What's going on, buddy? Shout out to Poland Ball. Holy shit, he does look like a brick house. Without a doubt, he does. Poland Ball. Salute to you, Poland Ball 69. Without a doubt, yeah. Hey, Bob Armstrong was a big dude. He was a big dude. He's not someone. He's someone you might think twice before you just swing on him. You know what I'm saying? He was known to be the most technical of boxers, but certainly if you're gonna swing on him, you might think twice. Me, I'm thinking about myself. Yeah, I might think twice myself. You never know. I think twice myself. Big dude right there. Big dude and solidly built. There are a couple of other pictures of him out there. That's not the only one. There are some pictures out there of him standing with some other guys. Even a picture of him in a situation where he was with Harry Lewis. Though I have a video out there on Harry Lewis, the great Jewish fighter, Philadelphian fighter, born in New York, though, but very much a Philadelphia fighter. He was a welterweight, but it's so crazy that in that picture, Bob Armstrong is there along with Harry Lewis. I'm talking about some great boxers. There might have been some other boxers in the mix there, but those two are the standout names. I won't spoil it. You got to check out either the Harry Lewis video or check out that Bob Armstrong video. I don't know if that picture's in there, but certainly it's in the Harry Lewis video. And if you don't know Harry Lewis, well, what better time to check out Harry Lewis than now, for sure. So salute to you, Poland Ball, being in there. The boss. Dan says, Joe Bosky, Bob, I got a great story for you. Okay, good stuff. Share that stuff out. I don't know him. Bob, you're going to have to put me on game. Flat boxing was known for slicing his elbows as well as blocking with his elbows. Yes, sir. The great George Elbows McFadden is mentioned. We have a video out there on him. Doesn't go in super detail, but I think it gives you enough to just get a general understanding. But you look at his resume, top tier, for sure. Poland Ball says, I'd hate to imagine what that dude would look like on Roy's. Just think about it, man. Yeah, he was a fairly slender guy. Big, solid, but still fairly slender guy because he didn't get this crazy weight, generally above 200 at his tops, but oftentimes he was below 200 pounds. So that tells you everything. Just think about that. Add in some extracurriculars, and man, this dude could have taken a whole new level. Hackenschmidt, good one right there. Invented the bench press and several others. Alexander, appreciate you sharing that. Alexander in the building, baby. Appreciate you. Bye. Buster Matthews was a big bull of a man, 6'3" and weighing up to 280. Insane. That is super insane right there. But yeah, that kind of tells you about how things are. Good guy, 280. Yeah, without a doubt there. Flat, the same thing. Saying, yeah, big guy, massively but built, but not always in shape. Yeah, that could always be sort of like Jarrell Miller, he's one of those guys built like a football lineman, but he's boxing. And yeah, just he was in 300 plus in his last fight or whatever, so it's crazy. But we know he's running into some issues test-wise. But Poland Ball, was Prime Matches still 280 even in the Frazier fight? That I don't know of. Good question right there. I'm sure, Baj, you would know. One of Joe Bosky's tougher fights against an Academy Award-winning Slavic. Great actor. Okay. Good stuff right there, Dan. But I don't think he was Poland. Okay. He had gone down to 240, 245 for a while, sort of like Zion, the crazy body for an NBA fighter or NBA team or NBA player. Zion Williamson being like 285 at 6'6". Or whatever. They say 6'7" sometimes, but just explosive. Snowflake Millennial 69. You guys are funny. You guys are funny. That's you, Poland Ball. That is you. Snowflake Millennial 69 right here. Woo! You guys are funny, man. You guys are freaking funny. Such a snowflake. I have dedicated 2+ videos to anyone who disagrees. Oh, shucks. I'm sorry. It's so funny. Oh my goodness. You guys are freaking funny. You guys are freaking funny. You guys are freaking funny, man. And man, talking about Bob Armstrong. Oh my goodness. But I didn't know you were. Oh, Chuck. Hey, next subject, please. Next subject. Can we move on? Oh my goodness, y'all are funny. Ketchum versus Fatke fights were brutal. Yeah, they were. They certainly were. They certainly were some brutal fights. Brutal fights right there. Yeah, they had a lot of roughhousing and stuff going on, both hitting the deck and all that craziness. It's crazy. It's crazy. You know, I don't even recall there, boss. Funny stuff going on there. Yeah. I think that was the second one where Ketchum took the title back. He lost the first one, but man, some bangers of some fights right there. Some bangers. The Cinderella Man, despite being a great movie, was also discussing his treatment of Bear. Without a doubt, Poland Ball, without a doubt. Patsky's own wife couldn't recognize him after that fight. Yeesh. Sheesh. Sheesh. As they say, sheesh. Is the second one? The second one, right? Boz, or was it? What was it? Temptations were a real thing. I know about the Temptations also. The band, my girl. But man, I'm studying now 86 after doing yard work. Bull crap, Rodolfo. You let me down, Rodolfo. You backed out. You backed out on me, Rodolfo. What the heck? Come on now. I thought we were cool. Alexander Max Bear Jr., correct me if I'm wrong, too, because of all the falsities and slanders of his father. Hey, that may have very well been the case. I know he's still around, someone I'd like to interview, of course. Max Bear Jr., I'm going to try to make it happen. I know he has a fan mail address and all that stuff. So, but I can't say that with 100% certainty, Alexander, but I wouldn't doubt if that was the case. I certainly wouldn't doubt it. Because, yeah, it wasn't a true depiction of the Livermore Larriper, for sure. It wasn't a true depiction. But that being said, I wouldn't doubt that happened, Alexander. I don't know for sure, or, yeah, I can't definitively say, but that being said, it might have happened. For those folks that you sang a Temptation song, yeah, of course. Of course, I know him. Papa was a rolling stone. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. And when he died, he left us, was alone. I can sing bass, falsetto, all that stuff. Alto, I think I'm getting it right. Ed Bearcat Wright, another great fighter from that period right there. Ed, or at least tough and rugged fighter, was in with a lot of competitions. Probably won't have any accolades that you could recognize, but tough fighter for sure right there, the Boz. Hey, everyone check out the Boz. If you don't know the Boz, check him out right now. Get a like, subscribe to the Boz, another burly guy of old. For sure he was. Then says Rudolph Ginn Blackjack Pershing was highest decorated military man in history. 6-star. Ooh, that's big time right there. Hey, Semper Fi to my fellow Marines out there. Salute to you, Semper Fidelis. If you didn't know, I got a soft spot there for the veterans, representing myself as well. Holding it down. Marine Corps, baby. Did what it does. Had to go in there and do my thing for a little bit. But Semper Fidelis, for sure. Hey, the game doesn't stop, baby. It does not stop. Does not stop. Miller doesn't care about being in shape. Yes, he does not right there. The Boz, you're right. He just comes in how it goes. Hey, Max Duran. Salute to you, Max Duran. Of course, we know the Duran name tied to a lot of boxers. Roberto Duran probably being the most famous Durans of the boxing Durans for sure. Salute to you. Hey, but you guys are funny. You guys are funny. I had to prove that snowflake comment. certainly. 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 You guys are a trip. Dan, I should call over Glenn Blackjack Pershing. Some may be offended by facts. Okay. Cool with you, Dan. Cool with you, Dan. Man, I think maybe catch your first one on points, then lost. Oh, that was the case was it the first? Okay, so he won the first fight. Okay, good stuff right there. I don't recall. I know I did a video on Stanley Ketchel. It's out there, folks. But you might be right, DeBoz. I can't remember all that. I need some help. So thank you for tightening it up. I'm here though, 86. Salute to you, Rodolfo. Salute to my man Rodolfo Rivera in the building, holding it down, regardless of the fact that he had to do work. He said, you know what? Screw it. Scrap it all. I'm gonna be here right now, fair and square. So hey, that's why I got love for my man Rodolfo Rivera. Check him out, folks. You know the Just My Imagination stuff about the Just My Imagination running the way, something like that. Yeah, I know about that. Hey, I know about some old school stuff right there, Rodolfo. Hey, that's before your time, well before your time, man. I know about that without a doubt. Shout out to the Temptations right there, my girl. Rodolfo avoided studying more than I do. Hey, without a doubt, Rodolfo, I appreciate you. Hey, saying screw it to the studying and joining in the mix right here for our discussion. That's what I'm talking about, baby. Black Boxing had a dream about Maxie Rosenblum after that deep dive. Oh, yeah, Slapsy Maxie. Hopefully you weren't getting slapped around in your dream and woke up swinging that air right there, Flat Boxing, because that can happen. It can certainly happen. Beautiful song, the Boz. Hey, you know about that, Boz? Hey, believe it or not, hey, Boz, he knows about a lot of good songs back in the day right there. Someone you want to check out. You want to know about some of the top hits, whether that's pop, R&B, classic, whatever you want to call it, even that Motown era. He put me on game on some stuff right there. So Boz knows. Trust me, Boz knows. Then Boz Jack Palance was one of the great actors, fought a war against Batsy with such a Palance quick fighting. Jack Brazo was his first name in 1991, Best Support Actor, Academy Award winning. Okay, big time. We even getting into some of the accolades of some of these actors out here. So check that out, Dan. Appreciate you sharing right there. Max Duran, I don't know much about Bob Armstrong. Who did he fight? Hey, Bob Armstrong fought a lot of individuals right there. Max Duran, James J. Jeffries. He fought Denver Ed Martin. He fought Joe Choynski. More, I believe he went in with Jack Johnson. I'm gonna pull up his record right here because I can't remember all of them right now off top, but those three for sure. But I believe he might have been there with Jack. Tommy Ryan in the exhibition. Listen to this, folks. Frank Slavin. He did fight Frank Slavin, Patty Slavin. Check out the latest video on the 86 Boxing channel as far as the long form with the one about John L. Sullivan's. Patty Slavin was one of those who Sullivan should have fought. For sure, check it out. So we follow him. I mentioned Choynski. Let me see. Who else did he fight on here? Joe Butler, former world colored middleweight champion, top flight type of fighter, or at least competition wise. A lot of guys. Frank Charles, former world colored heavyweight champion, first two-time colored world heavyweight champion. He was the first one to regain the title after losing it. Big time right there. Frank Childs, we don't know Frank Childs. We have a video of him out there as well. Who else did he fight? Because we are talking about the great Bob Armstrong, folks. So James J. Jeffries, we mentioned, he was also a longtime sparring partner along with Gus Rulin. Joe Goddard, the Australian heavyweight who was tough and rugged and is in with a lot of people. So Bob Armstrong was in with him. Tom Sharkey fought a number of exhibitions with the great Tom Sharkey. We did a video on him not too long ago. Big time puncher in the history of the sport, especially at heavyweight. Tom Sharkey, the fighting sailor. Jim Jeffries, who hadn't been in there with Jim Jeffries, a contender from the time, doesn't get a lot of accolades, but he was certainly worthwhile. But he had a lot of exhibitions, all that stuff with Jim Jeffries. I mentioned Denver Ed Martin. If you don't know Denver Ed Martin, no worries. Working on a video right now that will give you an idea of how good Denver Ed Martin was. But certainly someone you want to check out. Tom Cowler, check him out. Contender from the time, but doesn't have a big name, but you'll know him. Exhibitions with the likes of Joe Jeanette. If you don't know Joe Jeanette, then you don't know boxing heavyweight history. So check it out, without a doubt. Charles A.C. Smith. Do you know Charles A.C. Smith? Of course you know Charles A.C. Smith, first colored world heavyweight champion. Claimed such in 1970 or 1876 rather. But big time. Hey, he was in there with a number of individuals. Certainly someone you want to check out. If you don't know, but we do have a video of the great Bob Armstrong. So certainly you should check it out. As a matter of fact, I do have to make a quick run for a second. So while that happens, I want you to check this video out. This will give you an understanding of Bob Armstrong. I'll be right back. Trust me, I'll be right back. Some of you may leave, but hey, it's all good. It's all good. Just know that I am here. I just want you to see this.
Today,
My people.
we look at a prominent heavyweight contender of the late 1800s. How good was the king of the battle royal, Bob Armstrong? Bob Armstrong was born on September 4, 1873, in Rogersville, Tennessee. Armstrong stood 6 feet 4 with a 79-inch reach. He had an aggregate weight of 191 pounds for his career. Armstrong's career spanned from 1894 to 1904. He had 17 wins, 10 losses, and 5 draws. He also had 1 no-contest bout. 15 of his wins were by knockout. His win percentage was 51, and his knockout percentage was 45. Armstrong got his nickname, King of the Battle Royal, due to a brutal and racist carnival act of placing blindfolded African American men and boys in a ring to beat each other senseless for the comedic pleasure of the audience and in the hopes of winning a few dollars. Armstrong was a sizable heavyweight and got his boxing start after working in racehorse stables. Despite his size, Armstrong wasn't a very aggressive fighter, but sparred with many of the best heavyweights during his time, which helped to shape his fighting skills. Armstrong would get his first major test in his first fight on September 19, 1894. He took on Hall of Fame heavyweight Joe Choynski. Choynski was one of the best fighters in the world, though smaller than Armstrong. Choynski was able to outbox Armstrong for a 6-round decision victory. Some sources also reported the fight as a draw. On November 5, 1895, Armstrong took on Australian heavyweight Frank Slavin. Armstrong would secure his first career victory via 10th round knockout. The two men would rematch a year later, on November 23, 1896. Armstrong would dominate Slavin en route to a 4th round TKO victory. On December 12, 1896, Armstrong would take on Charlie Strong in a fight billed as the Colored Heavyweight Championship, as Peter Jackson had relinquished the belt he held for several years while pursuing a fight with John L. Sullivan. Armstrong would power his way to a 19th round knockout, securing his claim to the Colored Heavyweight Championship. After knocking out well-traveled contender Joe Butler on March 6, 1897, Armstrong would take on an underrated black heavyweight from the era, Frank Childs, the very next day. Though Armstrong was much larger than the 5'9" Childs, he was unable to secure a victory as Childs boxed his way to a points win over the 6 rounds. Armstrong and Childs would rematch on January 29, 1898, in Chicago, with the fight being billed for the Colored Heavyweight Championship. Childs would land a huge right hand in the 2nd round that sent Armstrong to the canvas, out cold. Frank Childs became the new Colored Heavyweight Champion. After rematch wins over Charlie Strong and Joe Butler in March and May of 1898, Armstrong would be matched with heavyweight contender Mexican Pete Everett. The smaller Everett needed 5 rounds to knock out Armstrong. On August 5, 1898, Armstrong would face off with future world heavyweight champion, the Boilermaker, James J. Jeffries, in New York. The two men were also sparring partners. Jeffries, who was a year away from winning the world heavyweight title, thoroughly outboxed Armstrong for a 10-round points win. After a rough and dirty draw with Australian heavyweight contender Joe Goddard in August of 1898, Armstrong took on Mexican Pete Everett in a return bout. The larger Armstrong maintained condition and picked up a TKO win over Everett in the 15th round. Armstrong would step back into the ring with Frank Childs in a shot at the Colored World Heavyweight Championship on March 4, 1899. Armstrong would fare not much better than the previous contests as the more skilled Childs forced a 6th-round stoppage to retain the title. Armstrong would face debuting Denver Ed Martin in his next fight on June 6, 1899. Martin was around the same size as Armstrong. Armstrong made quick work of Martin in this fight, knocking him out in the 2nd round. On March 23, 1900, Armstrong would rematch Denver Ed Martin, fighting to a draw in a relatively uneventful fight. After a year away from the ring, Armstrong would return to step in with Martin again, this time in London on July 25, 1902, with the Colored World Heavyweight title on the line. Martin, who had since remained unbeaten, would thoroughly outbox Armstrong to win a wide 15-round decision. The two men would again lace up the gloves in December of 1902 in a fast-paced 6-round contest that saw both fighters hurt or on the canvas on multiple occasions. Both would survive, but Armstrong got the worst of it as he lost the decision. After a February 1903 no contest with George Gardner, Armstrong would face Denver Ed Martin for the final time in their rivalry on June 10, 1903. In a quick-paced fight, a left hook to the body from Armstrong sent Martin down and out for the count in the 3rd round. Armstrong would go 2-2 in his final 4 matches, before hanging up the gloves for good in 1904. Armstrong never got a shot at the vaunted World Heavyweight Championship due to the times. Armstrong faced 2 Hall of Famers. His most notable fights were against Hall of Famer Joe Choynski, Charlie Strong, Frank Childs, Hall of Famer James J. Jeffries, Denver Ed Martin, and Mexican Pete Everett. Bob Armstrong died on January 5, 1933, at 59. Armstrong won't receive any accolades and has been largely forgotten, but he played a critical role as a contender in the early days of boxing as we know it now. His work behind the scenes, particularly as a sparring partner for many top fighters, is where he shined. Also, he shall forever remain the king of the battle royals.
Back in the mix, of course. Sorry. Had to step away for a quick second. We had got started. Why not finish it? Indeed. Why not finish what we started? So back in the mix. With that being said, hey, glad to be back. Glad to be back. So saw a little bit of something, or a little something on Bob Armstrong. Of course, it wasn't the end all be all as it relates to his career, but that just gave you a taste of kind of what he dealt with, what he went through in terms of starting out tough and having to work his way through from that perspective at the very least. But it is what it is. It is what it is. So let's see. Let's keep going through. Like I say, he had a dream. Oh yeah, he had a dream. I did see that one. I did. Fun fact from Poland Ball says Mickey Walker beat Bearcat Wright despite being outweighed 170 to 242. Insane right there. We know we have seen Mickey Walker traverse up the weight classes to fight at heavyweight, starting as a welterweight, So that tells you a lot right there. Very tough fighter right there. The toy bulldog, Mickey Walker. That's big time. Thanks for sharing, Poland Ball. Right, did beat Langford, but he was old by then. Certainly, Bearcat Wright got that dub without a doubt. But certainly, yeah, not the sort of premier version of Langford, I guess you can say, but certainly one who was still to be feared in some capacities, I would say at the very least, but not the best version of him without a doubt. Without a doubt. So Dubai said, always acknowledging Palance and was of Ukrainian heritage. Cool. A name I can't mention right there, Dubai, because I can't pronounce it. Oh, good Lord, does that mean he gets no credit? the flat Vassian right there. Palance, like my mom's was Ukrainian. My mom was from Kiev. His parents came from Central Ukraine. Awesome right there, Alexander. Salute to you, Alexander. Salute. Ukraine has a pretty solid history of great fighters, great boxers. We did one the other day on Kid Kaplan, Louis Kid Kaplan. He was a great Ukrainian fighter. There's someone else as well who is a very, very great Ukrainian fighter. I can't think of who it is. I know Hardline mentioned him in one of its previous streams or whatever. Can't remember who it is, but certainly rich history there as far as Ukrainian fighters there. Alexander, appreciate you sharing such right there. Good nuggets. The Boz, proud Ukrainian too. Yes, sir. We know about the Klitschko's being there. Jack Brazo. Like I said, I don't know if you were that deep in the second lie to catch that last joke. Rodolfo, Millennial. Okay, got you right there. Flack. Dan said Jackie Kennedy, her father, JFK father-in-law. His name was Black Jack. Tyson, of all people, is a big fan of him. Interesting right there. Interesting, Dan. Good information to share right there. Good information. Oh, just what the heck? I wasted something. Of course, off screen, I wasted something, and it's not cool. But hey, it's not the end of the world. Rodolfo says, "Oh yeah, I was 100% there, Flack. You ain't even a millennial though." Okay, gotcha. Certainly. Max Duran said, "Sheesh, young thug, sheesh." Flatbox, hey man, I'm on the other team. Good stuff, Dan. Would anyone believe an actor of a 1935 Academy Award winner was a great heavyweight, fought Jack Johnson in his first fight after winning title? Wow, that's pretty dope right there, Dan. That is pretty dope. Victor McLaughlin. That's pretty dope right there, Dan. Hey, good nugget to drop right there. Fought Jack Johnson, actor, but he could also throw them hands. You know what I'm saying? Hey, you got to put in the work. Hey, I got a heavy bag downstairs. I'm ready to get it in, baby. I'm ready to get it in. Let's do it. Blackbox said, "Damn, why did your brain hold this much information?" Good point right there. Good point. Victor McLaughlin. Good stuff there. Alexander, what it is, Flack. Alexander was on that shit too, though. Alexander. Victor played Irish a lot, but was a Scot from SA. Okay, good stuff right there, Alexander. I mean, to knowledge of all manners, Dan. No, Alexander English, horrible. Melissa Todd, appreciate you, Melissa Todd. She's saying horrible, talking about the battle royales. Those battle royale fights, she knows about those and what went down. Yeah, they were pretty horrible. Some of them were certainly some pretty horrible types of contests. They took place for sure. One of those things, yeah, it was the nature of the times, but those battle royales were not for the faint of heart. For sure, not for the faint of heart. Appreciate you dropping by. Melissa Ty. McLaughlin is Irish, though he must have been of Irish origin. He fought for English 1 and 2 wars, Bora, but when they found out he was only 14, then World War I. Oh, okay, cool. He became a fantastic pro. American anti-communism. Salute to him. Anti-communism. Quite a guy. Appreciate it. Dan, a lot of good knowledge right there. British boxing champion. Okay, so he rose. He got 8. That's a level worth mentioning right there. Been a number of British boxing champions, Commonwealth boxing champions who were some top tier type of guys, you know. So salute to that. Alexander Campbell, not McLaughlin, is McLaughlin. Okay, not McLaughlin, it's McLaughlin. McLaughlin, who was born in England. The family was of Scottish origin. Okay, cool. Good stuff, Alexander. Played in a lot of movies with John Wayne, the Duke, as they call him, John Wayne. Okay, guys, got to go down by. Salute to you, Boz. Appreciate you, Boz, for being in here, Boz. You can hold on for us a little bit, minute, but Boz, you got to go. Okay, I understand. It is what it is. Salute to Boz. Check us out, Boxing Chick, every Sunday, holding it down, typically at 2 p.m., in or around, depending on how things go, but generally 2 p.m. Eastern time. So calculate that in, factor that into your time frame. Rodolfo in the building. Rodolfo, flat boxing. I forget which gun it was, but there was a gun in World War I that produced in such limited numbers that it was actually forgot how it was made. I think it was the Stenschutz Hellriegel 1915. May very well have been right there. That's a good one right there, Flat. Definitely let us know, because I can't tell you. I certainly can't tell you. But that is a pretty interesting one. Max and Ryan have to leave too. Y'all be safe. Salute to you, Max. Appreciate you dropping in, buddy. Appreciate you, Max. My dad was from the Ulster by way of Scotland. Strange mix. I'm Scots and Ukrainian, Celtic, Slav. Salute to you, Alexander. That's good stuff. A great boxing heritage right there. Scottish, Ukrainian. A lot of greats that have laced them up, without a doubt, right there. Alexander, appreciate you sharing such great knowledge. Good stuff. Flat Box says, Dan, I'm sure you knew that with your World War I knowledge. Certainly. Oh, yeah, the Hellriegel. You know about that, Rodolfo? Okay, Rodolfo, this young cat right here knows a lot about the history of stuff. Name does look Scott. Cool. Rodolfo says, what is a prototype SMG? What wasn't it a prototype SMG? Was it? I don't know. Yeah, but it was used in combat. Says Flat Boxing. Austrians were behind that gun. Oh, is that what it is? Look, we're getting some gems right here, some knowledge. Y'all looked it up. Flat Boxing. Okay, caught up with the messaging. But that's good stuff right there. Hey, we got into Bob Armstrong, boxing history, and even guns that were, I guess, prevalent in certain periods in or around the time, you know. Just thinking about it from that standpoint, that is some pretty solid, pretty good stuff right there. Pretty good stuff, must say. Anybody know of the Pershing? Got his nickname? Got the Nick Blackjack Pershing. Interesting one. Yeah, I don't know for sure there. I remember varying guns, things of that nature. Not that is one from my time in the military, but don't know a ton of them. Beagle says, got to take my daily beat down to the gym. Down at the gym. Great vid. Thanks all. I'll see you after. It's another 4-hour marathon. If not, till the next time. Salute to you, Beagle. Salute to Beagle, everyone. Give him a like, subscribe, follow. Appreciate you, Beagle, for dropping by, sharing the time. This has been great to actually dive into the history, of course, with that era before the legendary 1910s. It gets underappreciated. It most certainly does. We had a lot of great boxers that came from that time frame and time period, without a doubt, there, Flat Boxing. You think about the great nonpareil Jack Dempsey. He was a man of that era. Second, I guess, technically, world middleweight champion. More of a welterweight, to be exact. But certainly, he was someone of that period, of that ilk. But we had a lot of greats that came through during these time frames and time periods, without a doubt. It's one of those situations. I mean, there's a lot of great boxing that took place prior to 1900s, prior to the 1910s even. And they were scientific boxers as well. They weren't just run-of-the-mill type guys. These are guys who actually were very skilled, and they knew how to put in that work. And they knew how to apply their trade there in the ring. So you don't have to hear it from me only, but you know of it with guys like Bob Armstrong. As mentioned, Bob Armstrong, not the most technical of boxers. Solid, strong, tough fighter who had to be thrown in with the best of the best right from the jump. I don't recall him getting an amateur type situation, or he didn't have any amateur experience that I know of. Maybe say for a couple of fights that are listed there on Cyber Boxing Zone that could have been thrown into the mix as such. But that being said, it was thrown into the fire there early on. So you had to learn on the job. And we're used to that type of stuff for sure. We're used to it. Alexander says, out of World War I came the Bar Thompson submachine. Good stuff right there. Good stuff right there, Alexander. Sharing that knowledge. We got World War knowledge going on too. Rodolfo, what guns did you use when you were a Marine? And do you own any right now? 86. I used the 50 cal, 240s, 9 mil, of course, M16, M4. Those are probably the most prominent of them that I use right there, Rodolfo, because they were the ones that were certainly in more of, I guess you could say, high demand, especially the M4 when they first came out. I was one of the first to use it, at least in the Marine Corps, and I was there in Japan, and that kind of changed the dynamic, and the M16 no longer became the norm, became the M4, a little bit lighter, shorter stock. You can handle it a great deal better. And M4, certainly probably one of the premier versions, semi-automatic, of course. But the 50 cal, that's one that stands out, certainly because it's so huge. Big rounds, I think 270 or something of that nature. Man, 50 cal is crazy gun right there. That is absolutely crazy. Just shooting that thing. Had to shoot it on a number of occasions, all that good stuff. And it just, you think about the sheer size of it. Certainly one that you would remember right there. So good question right there, Rodolfo. But yes, a mix of them without a doubt. Marine Corps, we have to get it in, get busy, baby. We had to get busy. Damn, my point was the random saying that about black and white helping each other. Gypsy always had Cola champion Bill Tate in his corner, without a doubt. Definitely a top sparring partner of Jack Dempsey's, without a doubt. Big Bill Tate. So if you don't know him, check him out. I have a video of Bill Tate against Kid Norfolk. Kid Norfolk, very underrated fighter. He doesn't have a big name in the sport, probably not at the level it should be, but you'll get to see a video of him taking it on Big Bill Tate, them mixing it up. And it's pretty glaring because Norfolk was about 5'8"-ish or somewhere in that range. So think about that. Rodolfo, yeah, that Tommy gun was shipped out to be tested on the battlefield, but it was too late since the war had already ended. Interesting there. Dan Dixon went all the way to L.A. to be at George Godfrey's funeral, Alabama Godfrey. Okay, the Leaperville Shadow. Good stuff right there. Dan, yeah, hey, Dempsey, hey, he was out there. He was in the mix. I know he had a lot of individuals he dealt with and used as sparring partners, etc. during his career. Dempsey, one of my favorite heavyweights, of course. And, of course, one of the most popular heavyweights of all time. We're going to talk about him a bit tomorrow, as a matter of fact. So be sure to check us out, folks. Be sure to join in on the mix of that, because we're going to be talking about the great Jack Dempsey. Dan says, imagine how glad the family was for Dempsey to be at his funeral. Yeah, that is big time. Big time right there from Wiki. Rodolfo Ella 86 was behind a 50 cal. A lot of my Army friends got adrenaline rush from using those. Yeah, those were big time right there, Rodolfo. Big time indeed. Yeah, heavy machinery right there. Pressing them like this, you hold it, you've got two little handles right there, and you're pressing the trigger. It's like put both of your thumbs on it at the same time. Like, that's essentially how it works. Those things will get, if you kept it going, it would get super hot, turn orange. So you had to be controlled and measured with it. Those things were crazy, do major damage right there. And the bullets themselves are probably about this long. So just think about that. That's almost as long as my face, somewhere in there, So you got to know that. Do heavy damage right there. Heavy damage. It's insane. Flightbox says, flexing like the Somme, or the Somme, the Aragon Forest, Passchendaele, 100% butchered the name of all. Definitely on my bucket list to visit. Okay, cool with your Flack. Cool with you. I don't know all of them. Rodolfo, oh yeah, major World War I sites right there, Flack. Alexander, he had commended 10th Cavalry Colored Troops. I was in the Army, J486, retired in 1998. 30 active duty. I love the M4. Okay, good stuff right there. Salute to you, Alexander. All right, good stuff. Good stuff right there. Army. Hooah. Shout out to you. Hooah. Represent. I know it. Hoorah to all my Marines out there. Man, that's good stuff right there. My mother-in-law, she was in the Army as well there. Alexander retired Army Major. So much respect for the Army. I've worked for the Department of Army as well. Salute to you. Hooah to you, Alexander. Passchendaele was crazy. The drainage system got obliterated by artillery fire and everything flooded. You had horses and soldiers getting shot and drowning in the mud. Wow, good stuff right there, Flag. Boston, crazy. Yeah. Where I finished up in my time as the Marine Corps, I was with an artillery unit, so I know how that can be. Big time guns with major impact right there. Artillery. Thinking about it, 10th Marines. I was 10th Marine Headquarters Battery there, an artillery unit, Marine Corps, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Crazy to think about it. But certainly, I know what you're speaking of there, Flack. Thank you for your service, Alexander. Indeed. Rodolfo, salute to you, showing love. Alexander, indeed, thank you for your service. Without a doubt, my friend, we appreciate it. Most certainly. Dan, Les Darcy was smart to skip World War I. British were lining up all the Australians for slaughter in World War I. Yeah, Darcy, unfortunate situation, unfortunate story right there. If you don't know, folks, check out the video we have on him. It's called The Wonder, or at least it's called Les Darcy something. But just look up Les Darcy. There isn't a ton of stuff out there, but there is more than some fighters or whatever it is. But you'll see an 86 boxing version, which I think might be one of the better versions, not tooting our own horn. But that being said, check it out. Les Darcy, hell of a fighter and a hell of a story. It's crazy. You should check it out if you don't know it. Good stuff there, Dan. Rodolfo, that's exactly how my Army friends describe how they use the 50 cal 86. Yeah, hit a little. That's what it sounded like. Like, I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane. So yeah, those are some of the ones that were there in the mix right there. Rodolfo, you know, Rodolfo. Alexander says, sorry, last Robert message, old age. No, you good, Alexander. We got it. Big time stuff right there. We got it. Rodolfo says, yep, all those horses that died in World War I, insane. It's not cool. Dan Gallipoli, British lined up all the Australians to get mowed down by machine guns by Turks as a diversion so the British could sip tea. Not cool at all. Not cool at all right there. Certainly not cool right there, Dan. But I know there were a lot of crazy things. Sorry for the noise, but a lot of crazy things that took place during those times. And couldn't put certain things past certain individuals. It's pretty crazy. Flat Boxing said they had the units in World War I called something like PAL units, where the same neighborhoods in the UK could serve together in the same units. Okay, cool. PAL units. Okay, not surprising. I remember they had these little buddy systems joining in the military, even in modern times. I was going in with someone from my hometown. He ended up not going, or he ended up pulling out and not going through with joining the Marine Corps at the time. So we ended up not going in on that buddy system. Oh, Nathan Scott Wilson. Nathan Wilson, are you out there still waiting? Nathan Scott Wilson, Scotty Too Hottie. What's going on with you? Me and him were supposed to go to the Marine Corps together. He pulled out, but I kept going. And hey, the rest is history, I guess you can say. And Dan says Les Darcy, I think, would have been one of the great top five had he had the goods to beat Greb, without a doubt. If you don't know the story of Les Darcy, check it out on the 86 Boxing channel. But if you don't want to check it out here, then check it out on some other people who have done some stuff on it. There's like a documentary out there as well that I think was in part, in some capacity, funded by or tied to the actual. It's like an Australian historic or library type site or situation. But certainly, if you don't know the great Les Darcy, check him out. Great middleweight, died at 21 years of age, but he was in with some of the best already at that time. McGordy, I can't think of McGordy's first name right now, or for some reason, it could be Ed McGordy, but he was in with the likes of him. The Bayonne Globetrotter, Jeff Smith, George Chip. I mean, top level middleweight at a young age who was putting in a lot of work, who would have certainly been world middleweight champion had the opportunity presented itself. And it just so happens he died at 21 years of age. Just think about all the work that he put in prior to such. If you don't know of him, check him out. Les Darcy, the Maitland Wonder from Maitland, Australia. Certainly one who is for the history book. Rodolfo, I know there's a dark question, but was there ever a time you almost got killed, 86? Yeah, that is a dark question right there, Rodolfo. Hold on a second. That's a dark question. What is on your mind right now, Rodolfo? Are you what the heck? What kind of sick stuff is that, Rodolfo, that you're asking? But no, hey, I've been shot at in Iraq. I was in Iraq. They were shooting at us. And I've seen a number of IEDs go off. They hit some trucks that weren't my trucks. And also me that we caught beforehand. So I guess that could count in some capacity right there, Rodolfo. But certainly I made it out. And I'm happy about it, baby. I'm happy about it. I made it out there, Rodolfo. Yeah, I'm with you, Flat. Well, shit, Rodolfo. Yeah, what kind of question you're asking there, Rodolfo? What do you want to know? But no, it's funny, though. But no, hey, I made it out. Made it back, baby. I'm in here. I'm here in the mix right there. But hey, certainly some crazy things you can run into without a doubt, Rodolfo, over there. Certainly. This was Iraq. I know some people ran into issues in Afghanistan as well, etc. You know, just one of those things. Hey, I'm lucky. I made it out. Yeah. Oh, but give me 1 second, folks. I gotta step away. As a matter of fact, I gotta dip out real quick. Hey, we're gonna get back in the mix here very soon, but I'll be back with you all. Sorry to end so quickly, but hey, hit us up in the comments.